Hi everyone, and welcome back to Autistic Alignment. I'm your host, Julia Kate Mitchell. I am the Employment Education Specialist at the Pacific Autism Family Network, and I am an autistic advocate. Woo! And today is my fourth solo episode on here. I'm not going to get bored of telling you how many, because every time I show up here, I feel like I am doing the impossible. So I'm proud of myself, and woo, go at me. And I'm also really grateful for everyone here for listening, assuming there is more than one person. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to talking about today's topic, which is self-advocacy and getting your needs met. Now, this is a topic we could all spend a very long time talking about, but I'm really going to try and just give us a brief recap, and then I'll dig into some of the more nitty-gritty parts later. So if it sounds more like a rant in this podcast, I'll apologize now. However, sometimes advocating can be draining, and it can sometimes feel like a bit like we're preparing for a debate, and like we want to spend weeks and months preparing, because if we express our needs just off the cuff, we often will get accused of being rude or ungrateful. And so I feel like sometimes this can be a loaded term. So if anyone else feels a little bit like that, and they feel drained just at the thought of it, or even the word self-advocating makes them feel comfortable, I just want you to know, like, you're not alone. When I first heard of the term self-advocating, it made me feel really uncomfortable, because it sounds like, I don't know, I thought it sounded like a little bit pretentious, like self-advocating. Like, I never heard of people doing this before. And to be honest, even now, I just prefer to say needs, because, well, it just makes more sense to me, having my needs met. And I guess the reason I'm saying that is just use whatever language feels comfortable for you, because if the very thing that is getting in the way of you doing it is the way that it's framed, then just reframe it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. So, me personally, I prefer to use the term needs. So, what is the term self-advocacy and where did it come from? So, when I looked it up online, it didn't say that it was one specific person who coined the term. However, there was someone called Van Runsell, sorry, bad dyslexia is kicking in here, but he defined the term as an individual's ability to effectively communicate, convey, negotiate, or assert his or her interests, desires, needs, and rights. And this skill is something that can be useful in a lot of areas of our life, whether it's friendships, if we're at work, when we're just going to the doctors, and in our general daily life. So it's important that we really develop this tool, because it really is a tool and a skill, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. However, it isn't easy. But once we've got the knack of it, it can be really useful for empowering us to live more authentically and confidently. And I should also add, not everyone does have the ability to self-advocate in the same way. And when more of us self-advocate for ourselves, we're not taking away that from other people. We actually just make more space for self-advocating to become normal. For instance, if someone in my work has a baby, or because they're a woman, they need extra days off work, or certain things to be considered, when they stand up for themselves and communicate their needs, it makes it easier for everyone in general to communicate their needs. So don't ever feel like when you do this, who am I to do this? I don't have the right. Why should I do it? You do have the right, and you can do it, and it's not going to be easy, and it might be met with defense. And so we do have to prepare ourselves for that. And that's why the way we communicate it is important. But your needs are valid, and they might look different to other people's, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be prioritizing our own needs. Remember, if anyone has been on the airplane, I just remember when I was younger, they would give you that book to look at, and it would always say, if anything happens and you are putting on a gas mask, make sure that if you're a mom, you put your own gas mask on before kids. And I feel that's true when we think about self-advocating. Before we support anyone else in our life, we have to be able to support ourselves. And one of the main tools that we can use to do this is self-advocacy, because it helps us to empower ourselves. And it also gets other people on our side so that when we advocate for ourselves and we express our needs, it means that people around us can also start advocating for our needs as well, because it makes them more aware. So, this is my very brief, inconcise history of self-advocacy, and I'm going to attempt to give this to you today because I feel like it helps to explain why self-advocacy in the disability or learning differences field is still challenging. So, in 1969, a doctor from Switzerland went to Ireland for some kind of world international conference for disabled people. And there was something like this guy had been advocating in Switzerland for disabled people to live within the community and to live independently and to be able to work independently. And this guy was, actually, I shouldn't stereotype, I don't know if it was a guy. This person, actually, no, it was a guy. I saw a picture of him, was really a pioneer in the field of the disability rights movement. And so he came to Ireland, he did this talk, which I think was called Towards Independence. And he was telling people that disabled people should have the right to live in community and make our own decisions and control our own lives. And this idea was part of the reason that there was a global movement around the time that started. And this also led into America and was the beginning of the People's First movement, one of the first self-advocacy organizations. And it challenged the stigma that individuals with disabilities couldn't learn, work, or live independently. And back then, a lot of us were still living in mental institutions or facilities for people who were deemed to have behaviors that were unacceptable, and basically we shouldn't be allowed out in public. And then this led to the shutting down of a lot of these facilities. And like I said before, the reason I'm telling you this is because this work is all still really new. And if you think about it, okay, I should have done a deep dive on a bit of feminism too, but basically all of this stuff's new. And when stuff is new, it means that the work that we're doing is difficult for us, but it makes it so much easier for the people that come after us, because we're not just fighting for our rights when we advocate, we're fighting for everyone's rights. And we are fighting for our own perspective. We all have a unique perspective, especially in the neurodivergent community, and we deserve to be respected for that, and we deserve to be listened to. And so often we're overlooked and we're not listened to, and we do have strengths. And a lot of the times when I hear employers talk about autistic people, I feel like there is so much focus on, oh, well, we need all these extra accommodations. And often it's not like that. There just needs to be a lot more of a focus on our strengths. And when our needs are better understood, it can often be realized that actually it's not costly for businesses. A lot of the time it's just appreciating our differences and making very small adjustments. And so if you have the ability to speak up and communicate your needs, I really encourage you to do so. And yes, you will be challenging stereotypes, and it will be involving forcing people to respect you. However, when you know what you need and you get clear on why it is that you need that and how it is going to support you in your personal growth and development, it makes it a lot easier. And this leads into the fact that it's not just about we just want to survive in the world. We really want to thrive, and we really want to be able to celebrate who we are. And so when we self-advocate, we're also celebrating who we are, and we are able to embrace all parts of ourselves, like when we stim and when we hyper-focus in on topics, and the very fact that our experience is unique in the world. A lot of us have sensory differences, so that means that our everyday experience, just walking down the street, is different. And really pushing away this idea that we need to be fixed and we need to change who we are in order to fit in, and suppress these parts of ourselves, because it is not about us changing ourselves to be accepted by other people. It's really about us being accepted for who we are and being included and embraced and and being celebrated for our differences. So when we talk about self-advocacy, what are some of the reasons that self-advocating can be challenging despite a lot of the things that I've said above? And one of the first things that for me came to mind was this idea about vulnerability. And for those of you who don't know, there is this author and researcher called Brené Brown. I think she lives in Houston, Texas, and she's written a bunch of books on vulnerability and shame. And one of the quotes she said that really stood out to me was, "Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it." And the reason I like this quote is that maybe it's because I was diagnosed late in life. However, finding out I was autistic really gave me a framework through which to appreciate my differences, because although before I knew that I had differences, I really did look down on those parts of myself. However, finding a label connected me to a bunch of amazing people in the autistic community, which is why I'm so, I feel so privileged to be able to show up online, and I want to show up online because it has been other advocates and allies who have supported me. So I want to be able to really give some of that encouragement and support back to anyone listening. And the point I was trying to make there was that, if we're feeling down or negative about ourselves, there's no point running away from who you are. You are who you are, and the only way in which you are going to grow is by, first of all, accepting who you are, but then encouraging our growth by allowing the people around us to support us. And when we are vulnerable and we talk about the ways in which we need supported, we risk not being supported. And when we put that out there, that can feel scary, and we often don't want to put ourselves out there because what happens if nothing changes? And then we've just made ourselves vulnerable for no reason. But also, what if we don't try? And that could make it a lot worse. And I know that, especially I think if you're a guy, we're taught that we shouldn't be vulnerable and we shouldn't have needs. And I want you to know that that's an unhealthy mentality, and we all need support, and we shouldn't feel ashamed for asking for support. So I hope that if somewhere in there you find the courage to be vulnerable and express your needs. Secondly, something that I think is important is this idea of what are my needs? How am I supposed to self-advocate if I don't even know what my needs are? And I don't know how to tell you what your needs are, because I can't tell you what your needs are. And then all autistic people are different. So it's not even like you can always look to other autistic people. However, when you know that your needs are different from the most people around you, I do feel like going online and reading up about other self-advocates makes it easier to accept and identify what your own needs are. And the next episode I'm doing is on self-awareness. So there will be some key tips on how to more clearly identify your needs, because there are a lot of strategies, and you can spend your whole life trying to get to know yourself. I don't even completely understand my needs properly yet. And as we change, so will do our needs. However, even communicating that you're not sure what you need. When I started my job, I was asked what my accommodations were, and I started off by saying, what are the accommodations that are offered? And even that was a little bit unclear. And I think it's unclear for all organizations, is kind of what I'm realizing. And so when we as self-advocates get clear on what our needs, then we can more clearly communicate that to other autistic people. However, some needs that might be included are wearing sensory kit, noise cancelling headphones, having your office moved into a different location, having natural light or non-flickering lights, being able to work from home, having people understand why maybe group situations can be more challenging than being alone, or maybe why you need to stand and move more than sit down. There are so many different types of needs out there, but the more you dig into it and the more you ask the people around you for feedback, the easier it is to become aware of your needs. And sometimes one of the hardest things for me about identifying my needs was realizing that my starting point was further behind other people, and that made me feel really ashamed. Apparently, I have the executive functioning skills of between a 6 to 10-year-old. And so when I learned this about myself, it did make showing up in the workplace difficult because I just didn't really know how to communicate that. But accepting it made it easier to grow. And although I didn't know what to do about this in the first place, after I talked about it and brainstormed a few things with a few people and we tried a few different strategies, eventually we did come up with one that worked. So if you don't know your needs, that's totally okay. Some other things that can make self-advocacy challenging are lack of awareness and education about our rights, communication challenges, whether there are language barriers or how verbal you are, or whether you have like poor social skills or different social skills or out of practice. If there's a power imbalance, so if it's, for example, to communicating it to a manager as opposed to maybe a friend, a fear of conflict or confrontation. There might be systemic barriers such as procedures and policies that you have to navigate, which can be draining, and a lack of accessible information on how to navigate this. You might have a lack of confidence and self-esteem, and I want to remind you that self-esteem is something that you really have to cultivate. And so if you are struggling with self-esteem and you're just beginning to advocate for yourself in these areas, know that that's a starting place, and hopefully the more you do it, if you do practice and you get support with it, then you'll be able to develop more confidence. And so it is normal to start off not feeling confident. Now, I know I haven't packed a lot into this week's podcast. However, as someone that is still new to self-advocacy, I am going to self-advocate and say that I needed space to be able to just voice what I do know about this topic right now, and I am not an expert. However, next time I come to it, I'm sure that I'll have a lot more to share with you. So keep amplifying your voice. Know that whatever your needs are, they are valid, and keep practicing. And I hope that together we can keep advocating, because like I mentioned before, when we change our lives and we advocate for ourselves, we're also advocating for other people, and we are changing the world for autistic people. So thank you very much for listening. Enjoy your week, and I look forward to talking to you next time on how to more clearly identify your needs. Bye.